welcome to another video. We're going to be talking about Linux Mint. More specifically, I'm going to show you how to install Linux Mint on your machine. When you first boot into the Linux Mint live environment like this, you're going to be able to do a couple of things prior to the installation. The most important part to remember is before you actually install anything, before you actually make that commitment by formatting or deleting the previous operating system if you have one and installing Linux Mint, I highly recommend that you actually do a test of this live environment to make sure that everything works properly. And what I mean by testing, I'm telling you basically to check all the apps and make sure that everything is functioning as it should. For example, if I launch the file manager here, which is Nemo, I can kind of see all these different folders that are available to me. All right, these are different locations, different directories, if you will. I can double click on any one of these directories and I can see that there's obviously nothing in here. But I can potentially create a new folder in here just to see how it works. And I can see that the new folder creation works perfectly fine. If I launch, for example, a browser and I navigate to a particular website like Amazon, I can see that the Amazon website works as well. I can tell by looking at the Amazon website that the networking drivers are properly functioning with my system. I want to make sure that I do the exact same validation when it comes to the Wi-Fi network card, because oftentimes if you are using a laptop, what would end up happening is that the Wi-Fi network card would be required in order for the Wi-Fi to work. So a good way to test and make sure that everything works well with this particular distribution is to use the Wi-Fi network card that's going to be available to you within the live environment, right? So this is what you're going to want to do and make sure that you can connect successfully using the Wi-Fi network card. Now, once everything has been tested and confirmed and you are certain that all of the programs, all of the hardware in your system is working correctly, we can then begin with the installation process. So now that we validated everything and we made sure that the distribution that we're going to be installing on our machine functions well with the hardware that we have, in this case Linux Mint, we can begin by double clicking on the Install Linux Mint shortcut or icon on your desktop. Now, once the installer launches or the installation wizard, we can select the language and we can click on continue. So in my case, I'm going to use English and click on continue. Next, I'm going to choose the keyboard layout. And for me, I'm going to keep everything at default and click next. I'm definitely going to install the multimedia codecs because I want to make sure that I don't have any types of problems when I'm playing different video formats. As you can see here, the purpose for installing these media codecs is that they are required to play some video formats and properly render some websites. From my experience, I've had issues in the past with not having the codecs installed, and so I've always opted to get them installed when possible. And we're going to select the install multimedia codecs and click on continue. Next, we're going to format and configure, or actually we're going to configure first and then format our disks in terms of, how do we want to install Linux Mint in this particular setup. So in my case, or in general with Linux Mint, you're going to have two options. You're going to have the erase disk and install Linux Mint. So if you have like a single disk that is free to use for Linux and you don't care about the configuration of the partitions or anything like that, you can just select the erase disk and install Linux Mint option. It'll automatically partition the drives for you and then install Linux Mint. However, if you are doing something different, like for example, dual booting, or you are, for example, looking to install Linux along with Windows, then we could potentially use this option here because then you have the option of customizing the partition layout or the partition sizes to what you want them to be, right? So you might give more disk space to Windows 10 over, let's say, Linux or vice versa, or you might have multiple Linux deployments or Linux installs. So this gives you the option to basically pick and choose what you want as the partition configuration. Another important option is the encryption, and this is where you get to use this option here that says use LVM with the new Linux Mint installation, and then you can select encrypt the new Linux Mint installation for security. This option here is, I feel, very important for professional folks or professional use cases where you're basically working for a company and the company needs to encrypt the data that's on your disk. This type of option is going to be very important because it's going to allow you to encrypt the hard drive. So if your laptop gets stolen or something happens to the hard drive, you're able to essentially encrypt your data and your data cannot be stolen, right? So nobody can decrypt that data because you have the security key. So in order to enable this, you just select the checkbox, you click OK, and it would be handled. Now, Because this is just a demo and I'm not going to be encrypting anything, I'm not going to be selecting this option, but I just wanted to kind of go over this with you just to kind of make sure that you're aware of this particular feature. So we're going to click on install now. We're going to do some validations when it comes to the partitioning that we've selected. In my case, I'm perfectly fine with the current partitioning layout and partition setup. And so I'm going to click on continue. Next, I'm going to select the Toronto time zone. And for me, this is where I live. So this is where I'm going to continue. I should say I live close to Toronto. So this is where I'm going to choose. Next, we're going to put in our name. You can put a computer name as well if you want to. I'm just going to call it test mint. For a username, I'm going to keep it as Andre. And then for the password, make sure you put a strong password. You then have two options: log in automatically and require my password to log in. Never use this option unless you're 100% certain there's nothing of sensitive information in your computer. This option is going to automatically log you in. When you require my password, this is going to be where you're going to have to put in your password every time you want to log in. And you also have the option of encrypting my home folder, or encrypting your home folder, in a sense that if you're storing your documents or data that is sensitive, you can definitely encrypt that home folder if you wanted to by using this function here. Click on continue. And now what's going to end up happening is Linux is going to go ahead and install itself. In other words, the Linux Mint installer is going to go ahead and install all the Linux infrastructure, all the Linux components that we need in order to run the Linux Mint install once we finish the installation. Now, once the installation is complete, we're going to come back. So at this point, the installation has completed, and all we have to do now is just click the restart button. So there you go. Now we're at the Grub login screen. We can select Linux Mint 20.3 Cinnamon, click enter or hit enter. So now that we are at the login screen, let's go ahead and log in. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is the first thing you're going to want to do is double check and make sure that you have the latest updates. And we can do so by running the following command. And what this is going to do is that it's going to basically update all the mirrors, and then at the same time make sure that it's going to double check and validate that we don't have any potential updates that we need to do for any of the packages that are currently installed, or the kernel or the drivers on the new installation that we just had. So in this particular case, as you can see, there is no need for any additional packages. So we know pretty much that this part, or the installation process of Linux Mint, is pretty much complete. At this point, it's a matter of getting all of your applications installed and getting everything tweaked just the way that you like it. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. And if this was very helpful to you, feel free to like the video and subscribe. And I'm looking forward to the next video.